Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. My name is Eric Pennington, and joining me is Jeff East. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Hi, Eric, and everyone listening.
Mike Perez, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, great to be here with you today, Eric.
I'm so glad that you were open to my invitation, right? Because sometimes when I invite people to be on the podcast, they can feel like, well, why would you want to talk to me? Well, Mike, there is a very specific reason I wanted to talk to you, not only because I know you a little bit, but also that the subject matter of financial planning, sort of financial management as it relates, is really near and dear to us. And I say it that way because it's a subject that sometimes people don't really think a lot about as it relates to our emotional health. And I don't mean that in the sense that if you make more money or invest more money, you'll be more emotionally healthy. But in my experience, emotions play a big role in the financial decisions we do. And I'm certain I could share with you some of my blunders that were rooted around emotions. But as a starting point, that's kind of where I wanted to go with it. And I think your stories and your history would be great for our audience. So let me start there. What have you seen in your time and practice? And I'm assuming, how long have you been in practice as a financial planner?
I'm getting ready to celebrate 32 years. So I've seen a lot.
I bet you have. I bet you have. And within that, let's go to that question again. What are some of the things you've seen people as it relates to how their emotions impacted the decisions they made from a financial standpoint?
Yeah, I think, and I jotted some stuff down in advance of our time together today, but I think emotions play a big role in this whole thing around money.
Yeah.
Because all of us have a history with money that goes all the way back to when we were kids. And, I think back to, my view of money from where I grew up. And, I started working when I was 12 years old. And so I learned at a very young age how to make money, but nobody taught me what to do with it once I did make money, because I came from an environment, it was just basic middle class. I heard this line in my household more than once, which was rob Peter to pay Paul, which means we're just trying to get by. And so you don't forget that stuff. That stuff gets imprinted on you. And then later on, you become an adult and you kind of find yourself living some of this stuff out. And it was interesting because came into the business 32 years ago, and I mean, I knew X's and O's and I was trained to do the business, but from a personal perspective, there was a lot that I had to learn just from the behavioral side. Yeah. And so it was almost a blessing being in this business, because I would be telling people what they should be doing and kind of learning it myself, because when I would sit back, I would say, that's probably pretty good advice for myself. But I don't think we can ever underestimate the scripts. I like to call them scripts that were handed down to us from our parents, our grandparents. And I think I was just reading this somewhere recently that, kind of at a very high level, people could be labeled either they're a saver or they're a spender. And I'm not saying that one is worse or better than the other. That's just how people are wired. But if you know who you are, then I think that makes it a little bit easier to help you deal with where you're coming from. But it's emotions and our backgrounds play a significant part in how we deal with money.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you talked about what you heard in your household, right? As I heard certain mantras or lines in my growing up, and those go to ultimately core beliefs, right? I'll never forget my dad basically telling me the best that I probably would ever be able to do is to get a job with the government where I could get a good retirement and end of story.
Yeah.
And I did. As I was going through adolescence, there was that part of me that was kind of looking toward that as that's a big option, right? And it was never a case of where it was either right or it was wrong. It was just that's what we believed, right? It's interesting to me as well that those core beliefs can lead to how we decide to manage our money, right? You just alluded to that. And where I'm going to go next, right, is so if that is the case, it would seem to me our ability to check those scripts, as you called them, to kind of question them. Is that true? Is it really true that it's robbing Peter to pay Paul? Does it always have to be that way? And I think about the financial planners have a great opportunity to help individuals check those maybe core beliefs, right? I'm a saver, I'm a spender, or like back to, again, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yeah. And it goes to the heart of our work, right? Emotional intelligence is how well you do at managing what you think and what you feel as an emotion, and the best or the most optimal decision that follows. So that's a long way around to ask you, when a client, even if you go back in time, are those things discussed typically? Meaning, how do you view money, or what's your background and all that kind of good stuff, so that you might be able to detect that?
That's a great question, and I think if I had my way, we would go really deep, and we would discuss these things. What I've learned over the years is I just try to meet people where they are. And there are some people that are ready to have those more heartfelt, deeper conversations. And there are some people that just, if you try to go there, they're like, no way, I didn't come here for that.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And that's not to say that as I build a relationship with somebody over a long period of time, that I still won't go there, because I want to get to what's really going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I think it's just a process of meeting people where they are. And I'm okay with that, because I think that's how you can build relationships with people and get to a better place where you can go a little bit deeper.
Well, and Mike, I'll share a story from my own personal experience, right? Yeah. So this was probably getting close to 20 years ago, right? And my wife and I we had kind of been talking about whether or not we were going to move or buy another home, right? And this was around the time when I was probably close to being at my pinnacle in my career, right? And there was first it was talk of a merging of two groups, and then it became we're working on a plan to do that. And Mike, it was all but it was a foregone. Yes. I was the guy, and everyone was telling me I was the guy. There was another person that was in the running for the position to run the group, but most everyone said, Eric, it's going to be you. It's going to be you. Well, guess what? They didn't choose me.
Yeah.
I was devastated, right?
Yes.
And I was also angry. And I want to emphasize that, because that emotion of anger drove me to, in multiple areas, to say, well, if they decided I can still do this, I'm still in a position to do that. And back then, I didn't have a financial planner, someone to say, hey, well, let's talk about this, right? It was pretty much, this is what I feel. It was almost like I'm going to show them, right? Now, I share that story with you because I got to believe, and I'm not going to ask you if you have specific stories or anything, but you might. Yeah. I got to believe that happens a lot. Not necessarily that you got passed over for a promotion, but maybe you were at a golf outing and someone had a real nice car, nicer than yours, and you felt, hey, I can rise to that, I can do that, and then you run out and you buy this car that you can't really afford. It's not really practical. Those kind of things. I'm being long there, but that's kind of one of those things, examples of me where I can look back and go, I didn't manage that emotion.
Yeah. I think one of the things, a couple of things. One that I've heard a lot over the years is, people looking back and wishing things would have been different, or maybe they had made some different kinds of decisions. And in the spirit of meeting people where they are, I always say to people, we're not looking back, right? Now we'll use the past to help inform us as we move forward. Yeah. But we're going to be forward thinking. The other thing is, and I just published a book this year, and one of the things I talk about in the book is this whole concept around contentment. And I think one of the great dangers in the world that we live in today, especially with social media and everything, is what I call comparative living. I mean, it is so easy to compare ourselves to other people. And as the great Mark Twain said, he said, comparison is the death of joy. It's like, ouch, And but we're all guilty of it. And I even have clients that I've worked with over the years. They will come to me and say, "Well, how am I doing compared to X?" Right? And I go, "You know what?" I said, "It doesn't matter." I go, "This is your life. We're creating your future."
Right.
As long as you're on the path to get to where you want to get to, that's all we really need to worry about. But man, there's a lot of looking back. There's a lot of comparing themselves to other people, and I don't think it's overly productive.
Yeah, boy, that's so true. And when you think about just general, this is point of curiosity for me. I think about the stock market, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I know there's all kinds of ways to invest money. It's not just the stock market, but I have found it interesting about the dynamics of fear and greed inside of that world, right? I had a friend a long time ago and said, Eric, I'm no great investor, but I can tell you what, pay attention to fear and greed. It will tell you a lot about where the market's going and what it's doing, all that kind of stuff. And I did pay attention to that. But have you found investors in general fall into that sort of proverbial trap of, when things are really great, give me more, buy more. And when things are bad, the world's coming to an end? Or is it always those extremes, or have you seen something in the middle too?
Yeah, I've seen it all in 32 years, and there's a lot of irrationality. That's the word I'm looking for.
Right.
When it comes to the investing thing, and I think I was thinking about this the other day, and I've said this many times over the years. People have a tendency to think that whatever is happening in the moment is going to happen forever. And you and I both have lived long enough to realize that that's not true, that things change, and they usually change for reasons that we don't even expect, right?
Right.
And I also said to somebody recently, I said, where we are right now with the whole investing thing, it feels in some ways to me like the late 1990s.
Interesting.
And I'm just, and this is not based on any data or anything. It's just a feeling.
Yeah.
But we know what came on the backside of the late 90s. We had the tech bubble bursting, right? And so I always warn people, like, be careful. It's like things don't stay the same forever, right?
Yeah.
And I think with investing, man, you've got to take the emotion out of it. You really do, and you have to get. I think that's a lot of what I do for people is we take the emotion out. And we say, okay, what makes sense for what you want to do with your life? And I don't get caught up in, so many people are worried about, speculation and what's the hot company and this and that.
Right.
Maybe you pick some good ones, maybe you don't. What I'm more interested in is, picking a basket of investments that are going to get you to where you want to get to. And if people want to play the speculation game, they can have at it. They can do that all day long. But I try to avoid that because, like I said, you can win big, but you can also lose big. And
that's true. I it's interesting when you were saying that. I kind of looked at my own experiences again. And the thing that I think I do now more than I ever did when I was younger is, even if I feel that sort of elation that, oh my gosh, if it's 5, it's got to get to 10. And if it's 10, it'll be 20, is having someone that I can go to. And I'm this is a praise to the financial planning world. I will stress to our audience, I'm speaking of certified financial planners. Those folks, I believe, are the kind of people that I can go to and say, hey, all right, look, I'm real excited about X, but I want to get your opinion because I know there could be a downside. What do you think? Right. And having someone that is not sort of, what's the word, doesn't have any skin in the game, if you will, to say, well, right now it's riding the wave of excitement and all of this. I might think about that a little bit more, maybe a little less to invest in that versus something else. Because I think absent of that, Mike, I mean, typically what do? We already know emotions drive the behaviors. I mean, as human beings, it's the driving force. But I think what happens is that it just overruns us and we make those decisions that are not optimal. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think it, when things seem like they're going well, people are like more. And when things seem like they're going bad, it's like, no, we're packing it in. We're not going to do it. I think it was Warren Buffett and I'm going to paraphrase this. He said something like, when everybody's giddy and, you have this irrational exuberance, he's like, it's time to like pack it in and stay in the house. He said, but when there's blood in the streets, that's time. Right. That's the time to come out and, look for deals and stuff.
Yeah. And, the examples, as humorous as they can be, there is a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those, right, where I have to just, maybe it's the way my mind works. I like simple and powerful, right? And I remember, and you might remember this guy too, Sam Zell. All right.
Yes.
All right. And I remember reading an interview with him, and the interviewer asked him, so how do you approach your investment strategy? It was one of these really deep and thought-provoking questions. And he said, well, I look at what the herd is doing and I go the other way.
Yeah.
And as much as that was clever and well-timed and all that good stuff, it's good advice, maybe not for everything, but it's certainly good advice.
It's something to think about. There was a story years ago floating around. I think this was in the lead up to the Great Depression. Joseph Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy clan,
right?
He said he was getting his shoes shined by the shoe shine guy, and the shoe shine guy was giving him stock tips. And he said, when that's happening, it's time to get out. That's what he said.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about how you approach it. There is this typical word we hear about onboarding a new client type thing.
Yeah.
But if somebody reaches out to you, maybe they're not necessarily convinced that they need a financial planner. Maybe they're just kind of just checking things out, maybe kicking the proverbial tires, right? Mm-hmm. How do you start conversations typically when people come to you, maybe on that very early side of things?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that you're looking for is you want to make sure that people have legitimate needs that you can help them solve for.
Mm-hmm.
But in my 32 years, probably one of the biggest things that I think has to be there in order for it to work is people got to be coachable. And I'm sure it happens in your business too. There are people that may say they want help, and there may be a legitimate need there, but they may not be coachable. And if they're not coachable, it never works. It just does not work. So one of the things that I have to know is, are you legitimately coachable, right? The other thing is, people have to allow themselves to some degree to give up some control, to be vulnerable, to be willing to share, because I've had situations where people said they wanted help, but then they wouldn't share. And my response was, well, if you went to the doctor and you were asking the doctor to help you, but you wouldn't tell the doctor what was going on with your symptoms and your health, well, how's the doctor supposed to help you? So those are some of the things that I look for early on. And it's interesting because I can't say that I had a level of self-awareness earlier in my career, and maybe I was a little bit more needy, but I'm at a place now in my career, because I've learned the hard way, where I just will not take on a client or a client couple unless I believe it's the right fit. And it was interesting. Earlier this year, I had a situation where somebody came to us, and we had a lengthy conversation. And I remember walking out of the meeting, and I said to my right-hand person who was with me, I said, I don't think that was the right fit. And I said, if they don't call us back, it's not going to hurt my feelings. Well, they called us back and they said, we think you guys are the firm for us. And I don't know. I had this moment where I thought, all right, maybe God's telling me that I need to work with them. Well, we had our next meeting, and my worst fears were confirmed that it just wasn't the right fit. And I literally had to tell the folks, I said, I'm sorry I wasted your time, but I owe it to you to tell you, I just don't think this is the right fit. But it came back to some of the things that I was talking about that need to be in place.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah.
I think back to the emotions piece, right? So, maybe the husband and wife made a mutual decision that they needed to get the quote house in order type thing.
Yeah.
Or some other reason. And again, going back to like those core beliefs, those things that we just bought into, and we're coming to the table with them. Right. And I guess, Mike, a part of me says it's not your job to be their amateur psychologist or counselor.
Yeah.
But at the same time, man, that seems really, really hard for you guys in your world, because if a person comes to you with a mindset that's pretty much fixed, right, that this is how it works and on and on and on, I would imagine that turns into being not the right fit. Am I close there?
Yeah. I think. I think that's my job to figure out if there is fit there, and if there's not, that it's okay to say, hey. I will usually, when someone comes to me for the first time,
right.
I will say two things at the beginning of those meetings. I will say, number one, this is a stress-free zone. So I just want you to take a deep breath, and I want you to relax, because I think most people would come to an initial meeting with me with a certain amount of anxiety and stress, right?
Right.
So I try to just calm everybody down. And then the second thing I typically will say is, I have one objective today, and that really is just through a very nice conversation between the two of us, is to find out if it's a good fit for us to work together. And if it's not a good fit, then we're going to shake hands and we're going to leave friends. And if it's the right fit, then I'll tell you what the next steps are. And then I get them to agree to that. And they're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can just feel, the anxiety levels and the stress levels come down when I say that. And I do it intentionally, because I genuinely want people to just be comfortable that we're just going to have a nice old fashioned conversation.
And Mike, there's science around what you're doing there. Because the trepidation, the anxiety, the stress of having to talk to someone about your money, all of those various types of chemicals, hormones, and peptides are raging typically.
Yes.
And having someone that is using some type of tool to say, we can take a deep breath. This is not going to, and this is all it is. This is not going to be something too heavy and all. It allows them to, and then I think their willingness to be vulnerable, transparent about what it is they want, where maybe those past beliefs or whatever they choose to go to can come out. Because I guess I'm thinking, in your opinion, you're not going to be able to help them if they've got portions of their financial life that they don't want you to know about, right? I mean, that's kind of a dangerous place to be, right?
It's just going back to my medical example, if you don't tell the doctor everything, I think that's problematic. It does make it more challenging. Fair and full disclosure, I probably have a few clients even today that I work with that I'm not sure they come clean on everything. I think I was just thinking the other dynamic, and this is, man, you get into some really deep stuff with this, is there's, in some of the couple relationships, there's dynamics going on between the spouses. And so as a result of that, they don't always come clean in the conversations the three of us are having together. So there's a little bit of, marital coaching, counseling, or just trying to, kind of work things between the two people in the couple. So that adds a whole nother dynamic to things.
Wow. Boy, that's a great example. And I mean, I'm just thinking about it now, like in the form of, I've been married for 33 years and the different ways that I viewed things when we first got married on into having children. And maybe in some ways I would say I've been a bit of a slow learner. However, one of the things that has helped me, Mike, is even in those times when I feel like I don't want to be embarrassed, or I don't necessarily agree with what she wants to do with the money as it relates to X, Y, or Z, I always remind myself, she's not your enemy.
Yeah.
You guys you're on the same team.
That's right.
You don't have to be concerned about her. And just because a word that came out of her mouth feels like what a word you heard 30 years ago or whatever, that you can check on that later, but you're on the same team. And I say that with empathy for those that don't have that kind of relationship. So I definitely don't want anybody in our audience to think that, hey, look how great I've got it. I hope you got the same. But I think that dynamic does impact the ability to move forward and being, maybe I'm going to use the term financially healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this, starts to take us down the path of, dealing with money in a marital relationship, right?
Yes, because unto itself, right?
Yeah, that's a whole nother animal. And I think that and I don't know what the exact stats are, but we know that one of the top reasons for divorce is money, right? The disagreements with money. And so I think, you were talking about, seeking out a certified financial planner. I think one of the great benefits of a good financial planner is having someone there that is able to play the role of bridging the gap between the two mates, right? In a healthy way, in a productive way. And as I say to clients, we have a very set model on how often we meet with people, depending on the type of engagement. And I will say the beauty of this is it forces us to get together to deal with these topics, because most couples, or I should say a lot of couples, they're too busy, right? Like the last thing they want to do is sit around and talk about financial planning and their money and all of that. And so if they know that they're going to interact with me 2, 3, 4 times a year, then they know, okay, we're going to have an opportunity with Mike as kind of the buffer to take us through the conversation. And I've been around long enough that I can look at body language and kind of see what's going on with spouses. It's always funny because I usually have one of my younger staff people in the meeting with me, and they're like, "Did you see the way he talked to her, or did you see his body language?" I said, "Yeah, I think something may have been going on there today, but it's universal. It's universal."
Yeah, exactly. I hear you, Mike. And one of the things that I think about, and my desire for our audience, right? If they can get something out of this show, I'd like them to understand the connection that the better we get at managing this thing called our emotions, right? Just the way I'm going to tag it at this point, sets us up to do better in how we manage our financial world, right? And though my experience from 20 years ago that I mentioned earlier may not necessarily match up with someone else's, but for me, that one is a vivid marker in time where I can go, yeah, I can point to that poor financial decision rooted around an emotion that I really didn't have resources to manage and to put it in its proper place. Because it wasn't anything wrong with me being angry about being passed over. There's nothing wrong with that emotion.
Yeah.
What gets us in trouble, Mike, and I know you know this, it's what we do when we feel the anger, right?
That's
for me, it was, I'm going to do what I want to do versus, again, if I look back, just this as an example, having someone who's a disinterested third party that might say, maybe you should wait for 6 months and just, maybe you should pray about it. Maybe you should just put it on hold until some of this other stuff calms down. That's where I hope, again, when I'm thinking about what we're talking about and how someone could maybe have a really great breakthrough with financial matters, Yeah.
Well, I think, what you were just saying, I think, one of the things that we talk to people about is building out a spending plan. And, you take people who are more wired as spenders, right?
Yep.
I just wonder sometimes, like, how many spending decisions do they make that are not really thought through? Like, it's just, the emotion is just kind of driving it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because, like, in my marriage, there's a pretty good yin and yang thing going on, and we like to banter back and forth because I think at this point in life, I'm a little bit more of a saver, she's a little bit more of a spender. But there's like a check and balance there in a healthy way so that we make sure that we don't get caught up in our emotions and make decisions that maybe will come back to us later and be like, why did I make that decision? And so I think my encouragement to anybody listening to this podcast is, as you make spending decisions, like, maybe take a time out, maybe let some time go by, because as we all know, most of our purchasing decisions are, made on emotion.
Yeah.
And now back to the episode. Jeff, what is the SEQ development report?
I'm glad you asked me that, Eric. The SEQ development report is something that we here at Spirit of EQ have developed to blend the idea of emotional intelligence with a person's spiritual life. And we're not talking about religion, we're talking about how they connect with themselves, other people, and the world around them.
Why is it important?
I think it's important because it allows someone to see where they stand, to give them information about maybe parts of their life they may need to work on, parts of their life that they're really doing well, and learn to leverage it. And it just gives a person a better way of getting through the world.
So how do you get this report?
Well, first, you need to contact us. Info at Spirit of EQ is just a great way to do it. Then you would take an assessment, 15, 20 minutes, done online. And then after that, the report requires a debrief to go through all the things in it because it's got a ton of information. And then if you want to further your journey, we can do coaching and things like that with you down the road. And that's basically it.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. And we'll be back to the episode after this.
Yeah. I got to ask you, and this one is, I'm not asking for any state secrets or anything that would violate anybody's privacy, but can you share with our audience maybe some of and I'm going to keep it basic, Mike. Where I'm going with this is poor financial decisions, right?
Yeah.
The ones that are you would look back on and probably say that wasn't very smart. So I'm not looking for like, well, they invested in Apple, but Apple then announced bad earnings. Man, that was a poor financial decision. But I'm talking about maybe some of the more basic things. You were alluding to some of it, saving versus spending.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you've seen over time that you'd share with the audience about, hey, here's one that people can make that typically ends up being a poor one?
Yeah. Yeah, I got lots of those. I was just thinking of the line. I don't know if you've heard this, but it goes like this. People don't plan to fail; they fail to plan, right? Which,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we do here.
Yeah.
One of the things, and I do some speaking once in a while, and I remember in a recent talk I was talking about this, is I think most people are actually not good goal setters. Like when someone comes in and like you literally start talking to them about, so what are your goals, right? I would say the majority of the people are kind of wishy-washy, right? And maybe some in your audience have heard of the SMART test, for goals,
Yeah,
right? It's got to be
yeah.
specific and measurable, attainable, results-oriented, time-tested.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when I ask them that question, it's like deer in the headlights. And so to me, that's like the foundational piece of, all right, what do you want your money to do? It can't be just about, I want to make as much money as I can, right? Because that could come at a cost, right?
Right.
So to me, the goal thing, and then, once you have, good goals, then I think another place where things can get a little wonky is on, and I alluded to this before, is the spending plan. Like, what is the spending plan? We don't like the word budget here because budget's like the word diet. Like, it doesn't make you feel good.
Right.
So we're like, okay,
Yeah.
you're going to spend the money. So where are you going to spend it? And we do this thing. It's called, and think of a circle. The circle would be how much money you make. And we have this thing called O, Grow, Live, Give. So your money can only go 4 places, right? So the O actually represents 2, which is taxes and debt payments. The grow is the money you're saving for the future. And the give is the money you're giving away. And then the live is what you're living on. So if you're living within your means, everything should fit into that circle. And it's always fascinating to me that when you start talking to people about where they spend their money, they literally have no clue. A lot of people are not tracking how they're spending their money. My wife hates this line because this is how I do it. But there's an old line that says, what gets measured gets managed, right? So we measure how we do the spending. And many people have heard this. It's like pay yourself first, which means whatever you need to save for the future, make sure you put that away first. And then you got that. And then, go live on the rest. So that's, something that I've seen. A couple other things, they say in investing, buy low, sell high. I've seen a lot of people buy high because they see something that has run up and they're like, oh, I got to have some of that. And then they end up buying high.
Would that be the keyword NVIDIA?
NVIDIA is an interesting, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about a young guy who had turned 50,000 into 400,000, like in a, 4 or 5 year period of time, and pretty much did it with NVIDIA. And the young person was saying that diversification's dead, right? Like that's not something you want to do. And people that are in the business are going, no, that's kind of the way it's been for a long time. Those NVIDIAs, they pop out every once in a while. But here's what's interesting to me about that. It's easy to look back and go, darn it, man, I should have bought like a bunch of NVIDIA like 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Of course, right?
But the reality is, if you turn the clock back, you would not have seen the world that way. So
no,
it's just the way it works. And NVIDIA is like a once in a lifetime. But I always remind people, does anybody remember Enron? That was like the darling at one time, and then something happened. And then the other interesting thing, we live here in Central Ohio.
Yeah.
I don't know what the numbers are, but I don't know what they are now, but I looked recently. But as you and I both know, here in Central Ohio, one of the big stories here is the big Intel development is coming here. And what a lot of people don't realize, because I'm sure people bought Intel stock because Intel's coming to Central Ohio. Intel earlier this year was down 60% year to date. And I'm not sure where it is now, but they're having some challenges. So things can change.
Yes. And I won't do him the disservice here on the podcast. There is a gentleman, he's a podcaster, he's a professor out of NYU. He gives some very practical advice on things on a lot of subjects, but I think his primary area has been financial. And he just recently had a podcast where Intel was part of the subject, and his insights about Intel, about where they were 20 years ago and what has dramatically changed inside of that world of semiconductors, and the shift to, Intel is now, I guess, partly focusing in on being more of a foundry manufacturer of multiple things for other types of companies.
Yeah. And
this did get me thinking too, how educated we are in balance to that emotion drive, right? Because, you mentioned, when you see a potential client or a new client, that when you start talking about goals, it's like deer in the headlights. I don't remember much in school being taught about just the basics around financial matters.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of emphasis about going to college, getting a degree, get a good job, but not about how do you manage when you get that first paycheck or whatever. Do you think that's part of it too? Is that driving I'm not going to set a goal because I really don't know what to do? Or
yeah, I think, and I don't want to misspeak, but I don't think the education world is doing a great job at teaching kids about, healthy money habits. There's a great line by Dave Ramsey. He said, winning at the money game is 20% head knowledge and 80% behavior. And as I like to say, behavior flows out of your beliefs, right? You can't change your behavior until you change your beliefs. And so, if you've got terrible scripts that were handed down to you growing up and you don't deal with it in a productive way, well, then your behaviors are just going to keep coming out of those beliefs. And, as I like to say, more money only makes you more of what you are, which is why, lottery winners go broke. People that come into money, right? If they didn't know how to handle money before they got money, then what makes you think they're going to be able to handle it after they get money? And I've seen that multiple times where, matter of fact, I was just talking to somebody recently. They were telling me about, the woman was telling me her boyfriend got an inheritance, and she said he's blown it all. He was buying like, $2,000 tennis shoes and this and
wow.
And you're going, so, yeah, I think it's behavior, and we're not teaching that, which comes back to the emotional competence, right?
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that I talk about today, the world doesn't need any more X's and O's, right? Information in many ways is a commodity now. I can Google it, right?
Yeah.
So to me, where you win the game is with your beliefs and your behavior and your ability to deal with things emotionally.
Boy, that's really, really powerful, Mike. Certainly, because I can look back and go, yeah, you're right. Behavior. I mean, it really didn't have anything to do with whether or not I had access to the information that would have taught me or instructed me or whatever as to what to do. It was the behavior, and that was connected to the emotions, and boom, there you go. There you are, right? I got to ask you as well, right? And I don't know how much work you do with startup entrepreneurs, but there's one specific one that I'm thinking of that I've known for a little bit.
Yeah.
And he has such a powerful story. I'm hoping to get him on the show at some point in the near future. And he is the quintessential story, Mike, of he wanted to start his own thing. He had this great idea. The great idea took off and very successful, right? The story that a lot of us see in the proverbial news, right?
Yeah.
Which, as you know, Mike, that's not every day with every startup entrepreneur. The majority of the stories are a lot uglier.
That's right.
But what I discovered in talking with him is that a lot of that pursuit was rooted around validation. He never felt like he got validation for being fill in the blank when he was a kid. And he thought that if he achieved this great thing, a la startup business, he would find validation for what he never got. And he said it really was a sad reality when he came to the conclusion that the business, the money, the success could not do that. It did not, it was woefully lacking in validating what he was looking for. Yeah. Now, the story has a really cool, not ending, but transition. Yeah. Because it led him to discover some things rooted around his faith, to discover that there's certain people, there's certain things, certain whatever you want to use as a describer, that are designed to provide validation. But in his case, he discovered money and success are a poor validator. And I wonder, maybe they're not startup entrepreneurs, but people who come in, have you seen that before? Where it's the using of money to fill up something?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I see people that have very unhealthy relationships with money. To me, money is nothing more than as I always say, money is nothing more than a means to an end. Mm-hmm. You came in with nothing. You're going to leave with nothing. It's neutral. It's just there to, you buy things, you do things. Most importantly, hopefully you make the world a better place. I think we all need money, but I think we place it way too high. I mean, to me, you living out your God-given calling and having great relationships, I mean, those are probably more important than money. Once again, I don't want to diminish. We all need it.
Oh,
we all
sure.
need it to live.
Yeah.
One of the things that I talk about is, if it was all about money, the United States would be the happiest country on planet Earth. And yet, I don't know what the stats say, but I know we're not in the top, right?
No, we're
so
not.
there's something amiss, right?
Yep.
And I mean, and I can say this as an older guy now, but I mean, it's taken me years to get here. But I mean, to me, that's part of having a healthy relationship with money, is just realizing its place in your life, that it's not as important as some of these other things.
It would seem to me that would position you to make better financial decisions too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, because when I think back, again, just using my personal reference point, I think in the time that I misunderstood what money was truly, the meaning of it, was when I was making my worst financial decisions, right? And I think as you begin to, I call it a healthy indifference, it's almost like it needs to be at that. You use the example, being really high up on the list. I think there's something really healthy when we move it from number 1 to maybe down to number 5 or something, right? Yeah. Or whatever the appropriate number is. Because I think absent of that, man, it seems like it's a recipe for a lot of things that are not so good, right?
Yeah.
I got to ask you, mentioned just briefly there that you recently wrote a book.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear from you about the book. What maybe made you decide to write it? I mean, I know that the subject matter has been covered a lot, but is there something else that kind of was a driver for you wanting to write the book?
Yeah, I've been in the business 32 years, and about 9 years ago, I mean, I'm a man of faith, and about 9 years ago, I got introduced to the Kingdom Advisor movement out of Atlanta, Georgia. I also got introduced to generous giving out of Orlando, and just started to really immerse myself into the whole faith and finance and generosity thing. And I've been on this journey. It's been life-changing for me. I've been trying to share as much as I can with the people that I interact with. And so writing this book was just basically the culmination of this journey over the last 9 years of just trying to take what I've been learning and put it in print, put some of my stories around it. And what I have found is when you start to integrate your faith into what you're trying to do with your finances, there's some really cool things that happen. I just find that I have more peace, I have more joy, contentment, those kinds of things. And it kind of comes back to what I was just saying of just having a different perspective on money. I've just come to the realization that everything I have is a gift from God, that I'm here just trying to be a good steward with it. I mean, it's promised in the scripture that, through our faith, we will be taken care of. I've never been disappointed with that. And I'm not talking prosperity gospel or anything like that.
Sure.
And so I'm just trying to take what I've experienced and share that with as many people as I can, because I'm sure there are other people out there that would like more peace and joy and contentment.
Oh my gosh. And though this episode, Mike, will be dropped probably after November 5th, trust me in that I know that's been very prevalent for a lot of people. And the pathway to getting to the peace that does not fade is certainly, we could probably do another show on that, but I think it's palpable, the desire for it, because I think my wife and I, gosh, and I'm a jokester at heart, and she would tell you that he thinks he's ready for stand-up, but she was talking to me about something that was really kind of serious. And I just quipped back, well, what I'd like to figure out is how can I stop these people from texting me about Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno? My gosh, I'm at a point now where it's like, I don't think I want to vote for either one of them, because you guys, it's like, right? And that's me. And I think, in some ways, Mike, and I know this is not necessarily financial, I almost think, you mentioned about money occupying a priority that it wasn't intended to. I think we've kind of done that with politics too. I think it's too high on the list. And that, for our audience, is not me saying it's not important to vote or it's not important to be involved. That's table stakes. I get that. But I think we've moved it to a new level beyond what it was intended to be. No doubt about that in my head.
And I would say this, Eric, because I was thinking about this recently, is that it doesn't matter whether it's a red president or a blue president. I've lived long enough that we've had them from both sides of the aisle. And somehow, some way, because every election, they always say the other side's bad and your life's going to be ruined and everything. Yeah. But somehow, some way, I've been able to have financial success in my life. And so my encouragement to everybody is, in spite of what happens in the political spectrum, if you follow just some of the basic stuff of what we're talking about here, trust me, you'll have the financial success that you desire for your life.
Well, and Mike, I think it comes back to, again, you mentioned about behavior and that being a very key thing. And I was so refreshed just as a story about, this idea about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen on November 5th type thing. Yeah. So I'm in this call, and there was two folks on it. And one of them was kind of leading it and kind of had sort of management responsibility at the company. And she was saying, well, this is one of the issues we have in election years. People tend to pull back and they want to wait. They want to see what's going to happen. And the other person on the call, it just kind of rolled their eyes. And it wasn't a rolling of the eyes like she was being dismissive of what was said, but it was almost like, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I agree with you. And I said, isn't it interesting? Because the last time I checked, I'm going to have to pay my mortgage on November 5th. Yeah. And it's going to be due again in December, and it'll be due again in January. So I got to figure out my plan to make sure that I'm doing that. And that's just one thing. And it was kind of cool because I don't know where they were at politically. My gut says probably split, between the two. But they were like, yeah, exactly. I got a life to live. I got kids. And that's reality, Mike. Again, probably, and I'm spending way too much time on it. It has been expanded beyond its where it should be. So as we get toward the closing here, and this has been great having a conversation with you. Anything you'd like to tell the world that you're excited about? What's going on for you, whether it's in your practice or just even outside of that?
Yeah, I'm very excited about our business. We just did a big merge, and so now I'm a partner in a national biblically based wealth management firm here. I'm the guy that oversees the Columbus office. But I'm really excited about this now that I have the book out. I'm really excited about the whole faith and finance thing. I work with clients from all walks of life, different religions, different backgrounds. But what's interesting is the principles that we use, they work no matter what. So it's pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to me to be able to share that message, to share my wisdom, to share stories of things that have happened to me along the way, because it hasn't been, I can tell you, hasn't been straight up to the right. A lot of zagging in there.
Right.
But that's what gets me up every morning. And, it's a conversation I had recently. I think, when you're younger, there's kind of this desire that, I'm going to go out, I'm going to save the world, and you start to get a little older, you get a little wiser, and you come to the realization that nobody's going to save the world. I saw a quote recently. It says, you can't save anyone. You can only love them. And I love that. But
oh, wow. Yeah.
No one gets to save the world. And so I've kind of just resorted back to that quirky old story that's been around for years, the starfish story, which I will retell real quickly for your listeners, which is there's a story where there's a little girl, she's walking along the beach and all these starfish had washed up on the shore. There were like thousands of them, and she's picking them up and she's throwing them back into the water. And this probably cynical old guy came up to her on the beach and said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm saving the starfish." And he said, "You can't do that." He's like, "There's thousands on the beach." And she turned to the guy and she said, "Well, I just saved that one I just threw back in." So I'm just like one person at a time. And like, if I get in front of one person every day and can interact with them and share my story, my energy, my wisdom, that is a good day for me. And that's why doing this podcast, I probably get to talk to more than one person, but this is exciting to me because I get to share and hopefully encourage other people.
Oh, and that's awesome, Mike. And that was the reason why I wanted you to be on the show. So for our audience out there, we appreciate you tuning in, and we thank Mike Perez for joining us today. In the show notes, as always, we'll have Mike's information and some links and things of that nature, but we look forward to the next time we're together. Take care.
Thanks, Eric.
Hi, everyone. This is Eric Pennington with the Spirit of EQ. I'm not introducing a new episode today. I'm here to tell you some things that might help you. Jeff, you're with me as always. So
yes.
How do people get in touch with us?
Well, the best way is just send us an email at info@spiritofeq.com.
That's awesome. Jeff, I was also thinking about reviews, and I'm notoriously bad at asking for them, so reviews on all of the platforms, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes.
You think that'd be good?
I think that would be great because, one, that will help us learn how to make better ones, and it's always good for us.
So we're not the perfect podcast hosts?
We're close.
Okay, all right, but
not,
still,
not totally
we want
perfect.
your feedback.
But it also might let us know a new subject. Hey, we need to dig deeper into that.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think.
Cool. We really appreciate that. As always, too, there is social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we also have a YouTube channel. Those also have mechanisms or options for you to be able to leave a comment, a like, or those kind of things. Just want to make sure that you know how to get in touch with us. Right, Jeff?
Right. We appreciate you all.
Thank you. Once again, we really appreciate you tuning in today. One of the things that Jeff and I want to bring to your attention as well is that when we created this podcast, it was not intended to take the place of a clinician. In other words, if you find yourself in a place where there's something deeper going on or something that you cannot solve on your own, we do recommend that you reach out to a clinician of some sort. This podcast is purely opinion-based, and it is rooted in the desire to help you along your path in whatever way we can. However, it is never going to replace, nor should it ever be looked at as a replacement for clinical help in any way. Thanks again for tuning in.